I'd also like to acknowledge Liz Ford for her contribution and her work that's helped us to structure this presentation tonight. So communication, which is making contact with others and also being understood when we make that contact. Thanks, Phil. So what we want to look at is the ability to listen and to write and speak and communicate, sadly, will eventually cease, but the rate is individual to each person. So when you talk to others, what you need to understand, or what we'd like you to understand, is each person's going to be different, and your journey may well be very different to someone else. And some of those things that we're going to discuss this evening will work for some and not for others. And not all the interventions that we will discuss are going to be appropriate due to individual difficulties. So trying out different systems will be important. So we're going to discuss different systems. So please feel free to write down or ask us your questions at the end, and we will talk about them, because we're only going to touch on some systems. We don't have time to go through them all at the moment, but we will have time to answer your questions at the end. What is important to all individuals, especially, is a referral to the speech and language therapist as soon as possible. And people like ourselves, like myself and Phil, will be available to do that for you at the very beginning. And that's important to have to monitor that throughout your journey. Thanks, Phil. What we find is it's really, really important to slow everything down, and that's to slow your understanding of your family member down, slow your speech down, try and slow their speech down as well, because I think all their thoughts are slowing down, their speech is slowing down, and if you can slow that down, then you can maybe understand what they're saying and what they're trying to say much easier. Manage your expectations. So manage what you're expecting them to say, and manage what you're expecting them to understand of what you're saying. The fewer words that an individual has left, the fewer words we should use. So don't use complicated sentences. Try and use simplistic language without being without the baby talk. Just use simplistic language. Be direct. Use very short sentences and short words. Don't be too airy-fairy with your sentences. Don't be too descriptive with your words. If you can repeat back to the person what they've said, just to make sure you've understood and you've not misunderstood what they've said, but in a respectful way. Try and make eye contact when you're talking to someone. You know, when you haven't understood what someone's saying to you, it's much easier to understand someone if you're making eye contact rather than when you're on the phone. And it's the same when you're sitting with someone. Try and make eye contact. Try and get other sorts of understanding from them. Be non-confrontational when you're talking to them. Sometimes if you sit directly in front of someone and you're kind of a misunderstanding what they're saying, that can be quite confrontational. Try standing side on to them or sit by their side, and they're less likely to get upset. It's much more calming. And consider all forms of communication to help. There's all forms of communication that you can use, not just speech. Thanks. When you're talking to someone, try and limit their choices. Instead of saying, would you like lunch today, and rhyming off a lot of things, it's better off to say to someone, would you like soup or would you like a sandwich? Don't say, would you like tomato soup or would you like a ham sandwich? That's what I was saying earlier. That's really too much of a complicated sentence. Try and keep it short. Try using yes or no boards, or if even that's too complicated, a simple thumbs up or a thumbs down. Try and use other cues, such as a simple hand on the shoulder for them to sit down. Now, I'm not talking about pushing someone down. I'm just talking about a simple hand on the shoulder can help someone to sit down. When you're talking to someone, or if you've got family members visiting, try and remove all the distractions around the house, you know, like TVs on, radios on, because that can be really distracting for the family member, trying to understand what's going on around. Try and keep the distractions to the voices that are around them. Don't have multiple conversations going on. Try and tell the family members that are visiting to try and only keep one conversation going on at once and direct that to the person they're visiting. Too many things going on at one time can be really torturous for that person who's trying to focus on understanding what's being said, understanding the language, and trying to keep everything nice and slow. And when you go in, it's good if you can explain to the visitor to identify themselves clearly. It's a good idea if you tell them to name who they are and their relation to their loved one. You know, just something simple like, you know, "Hi, I'm George. Remember, we used to work together." Something really simple and innocuous. And finally, are you telling me to slow down now, now Phil? Trying to just to slow everything down. Sometimes it's okay to just be there. There's no need to always speak. Sometimes you just have to hold their hand, and that's enough.